Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. The morning after he disappeared, the shower was still warm when I stepped into the bathroom. That's what I remember most. Not the silence, not the empty bed, not even the missing car. Just the faint fog on the mirror, like he'd been there moments before. Like he had one foot in the door and the other already in another life. I've never told anyone what happened that night. Not really. People think they know. They saw the aftermath, the deleted photos, the hushed phone calls, the way I stopped showing up to church. But they never heard the words I said to him before he left. And they definitely don't know what was written on the note he left under the cereal box. A note I still haven't thrown away. This isn't the kind of story that makes you feel better by the end. I'm not some tragic heroine. I'm not even asking for forgiveness. I just want someone to hear it. Because silence is a heavier punishment than anyone warned me about. So here it is. The truth. It was a Thursday when I crossed the line. I remember because we always ordered takeout on Thursdays. Chicken lo mein for him, spring rolls for me. Except that night, I told him I had a work dinner. A last-minute client pitch that didn't exist. Instead, I drove across town in a sweater I never wore around him. The one that showed just a bit too much. I parked 3 blocks away from a hotel with flickering lights and a front desk clerk who didn't ask questions. And I walked in with a man whose last name I still don't know. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't glamorous. It was hollow and mechanical and over in less than 20 minutes. I left feeling like I'd just set fire to a house and tried to pretend the smoke was perfume. When I got home, he was asleep, or pretending to be. I crawled into bed fully dressed and stared at the ceiling until morning. The next day, he made coffee like usual, kissed my forehead, took Jasper, our dog, for a walk, and never came back. The police asked if he'd taken anything. I said no, but that wasn't true. He took something I can't describe, something that doesn't have a name. A weight in the air, a hum in the walls. His presence. He didn't pack a suitcase. His toothbrush was still by the sink. His favorite hoodie, the one with paint on the sleeve from when we redid the guest room, still hung behind the door. His shoes, his keys, even his wallet were all untouched. But he was gone, like he dissolved into the quiet between heartbeats. They searched the surrounding area, interviewed neighbors, checked traffic cams. The last footage showed him walking Jasper down Wilmot Street. He waved to an elderly woman across the street, stooped to tie his shoelace, and then, nothing. No return. No car leaving the driveway. It was like he vanished between one frame and the next. I told the detective about the note a week later. I lied at first, said I hadn't found anything. But it was burning a hole in my dresser drawer. It wasn't long. Just a folded piece of notebook paper with uneven edges. The handwriting was his, but shakier than usual. It read, "You made a choice. Now I will too. Tell them what you did." That was it. No goodbye. No accusation. No rage. Just a strange kind of permission to ruin myself, publicly, if I ever wanted the pain to go somewhere. I didn't tell his family. I couldn't. I let them believe it was sudden onset depression or a mental break. Something vague and dramatic that excused my silence. His sister cried to me over the phone, begging me to let her stay in our guest room in case he came back. I told her no. That was the first time I felt truly alone in our house, when I heard her sobbing and realized I was defending a secret instead of a person. Jasper, the dog, started sleeping by the front door. Every time someone walked by, his ears perked up. Every car that slowed near the house, he rushed to the window. For weeks, I kept the porch light on, not because I believed, but because I didn't want to believe I'd stopped. I know people expect closure, some kind of grand twist. But all I had was his absence and a choice, the same one he gave me. Live with it, or tell someone. This is me, finally telling someone. It's strange how quickly people stop asking questions. At first, there were texts and voicemails every hour. Friends from his work, old college buddies, neighbors who only knew him as the quiet guy with the golden retriever. But after a while, the noise died down. People don't like mysteries without endings. It makes them uncomfortable. So they start rewriting the story into something they can live with. Maybe he had a breakdown. Maybe he ran off with someone else. Maybe she knows more than she's saying. They were right about that last part. I didn't know more. I just didn't want to face it. I started doing the things he used to do, half out of guilt, half out of desperation. I paid the water bill early. I picked up Jasper's heartworm meds. I even attempted to fix the leaking faucet he always said he'd get to. At night, I sat on the couch in complete silence, drinking tea the way he used to. Too hot to sip, but too comforting not to hold. I kept his seat on the left side of the sofa untouched. I couldn't bring myself to sit there. Ivy texted me a few times. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. That night wasn't about her, not really. She could have been anyone. A symbol of something I didn't have the courage to ask for. I guess I was trying to wake up my own life, and ended up killing his instead. One afternoon, I found myself dialing his number. I don't know what I was expecting. I knew the phone was in the drawer by our bed. But I listened to it ring anyway, like some pathetic ritual. Just the sound of his voice in that old voicemail message was enough to make my stomach turn. He sounded so alive, so normal. Hey, it's Ryan. Leave a message. Or don't. Either way, hope your day's better than mine. That was his kind of humor. Dry, a little sad, oddly charming. I left a message. I didn't plan to. But when the beep came, I whispered, I'm sorry. I'm not asking you to come back. I just want to know if you're okay. The next morning, Jasper's leash was missing. That broke me. The door was locked. There was no sign of a break-in. Nothing else was touched. But the leash we always kept hanging by the stairs, the one with his worn-out carabiner clip, was gone. I called every shelter, every neighbor, even the police. But there was no sign of Jasper. Just like his owner, he'd vanished without a trace. That's when it hit me. Maybe I wasn't alone in this house after all. Or worse, maybe I was, and he was just better at disappearing than I thought. A week after the leash disappeared, I started hearing sounds at night. Not loud, not dramatic, just subtle things. A floorboard creaking when I hadn't moved. The soft click of the front gate swinging shut, even though there was no wind. I'd lie in bed with the covers pulled up to my chin, heart pounding like a kid scared of the dark. But I wasn't afraid of ghosts. I was afraid of being seen by him. I began leaving lights on. At first, just the porch, then the kitchen, then the hallway. Eventually, I was sleeping with every room softly glowing, like a lighthouse built for someone who might never return. Some nights I'd catch my reflection in the glass and jump, thinking it was someone outside looking in. I was unraveling, and I knew it, but I didn't stop, because the only thing scarier than losing him was the idea that he might come back. One morning, I walked out to the mailbox and found something strange. A roll of undeveloped film in a tiny Ziploc bag. No note, no envelope, just the film. I hadn't touched a camera that used film since college. My fingers trembled as I held it, wondering if this was his way of speaking to me. Was it a threat? A message? A memory? I took it to a small photo lab 2 towns over, hoping the anonymity would protect me from whatever I was about to uncover. They told me it'd take a couple of days. I couldn't breathe the entire drive home. Every scenario looped in my head. Pictures of me and Ivy, somehow taken from a distance. Photos of Ryan, alive but watching. Or worse, photos of Jasper, alone, hurt, abandoned. When the results were ready, I picked them up in a brown paper envelope, too terrified to open it in the parking lot. I waited until I was home, until I was sitting at the same kitchen table where I once confessed to him. I peeled the envelope open, slid the photos out, and felt my throat close. They were pictures of us, but not recent ones. These were old, grainy, soft lighting. Some from our road trip to Maine 5 years ago. Some from the farmer's market in June. One where we were laughing, genuinely laughing, while sharing a snow cone on the boardwalk. I hadn't seen those moments in so long. I almost didn't recognize the woman in them. She looked happy. She looked like she loved him. She looked like me before I destroyed everything. On the back of the last photo was a single sentence written in blue ink. I was there even when you weren't. I dropped the photo. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Because now I knew he hadn't just vanished. He was watching me. For the next few days, I lived in a kind of suspended paranoia. Every sound felt amplified. Every passing car made me freeze. I began closing the curtains during the day and watching the windows at night. My phone stayed in my hand constantly, though I wasn't texting anyone. I was just waiting. For something. Anything. I started reading the backs of the old photos again and again, as if I'd missed some hidden message. But there was only that one line. I was there even when you weren't. That sentence gnawed at me. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't kind either. It was haunting. Like he was trying to tell me that my betrayal didn't start that night in the hotel room. It started long before. And he'd known. He'd known the whole time and stayed anyway. Until he didn't. I decided to drive to the last place we'd gone together before everything unraveled. A hiking trail we used to love, about an hour outside the city. It was secluded, not particularly scenic, but it was ours. We used to joke that the trail was so empty because it was ugly, and that made it perfect. I don't know what I was hoping to find. Closure? A sign? Maybe even him. I parked at the same spot as always, gravel crunching under my tires. The trailhead looked the same, untouched by time or consequence. I walked slowly, my heart racing harder with every step. About 20 minutes in, I spotted something wedged between two rocks near the path. It was a book. His book. The tattered paperback he used to read on lazy Sunday mornings. I knelt down and picked it up, brushing off dirt. Tucked inside was a note. No envelope, just a folded piece of lined paper. It wasn't handwritten this time. It had been printed from a typewriter. I recognized the uneven ink blotches. He'd inherited that ancient machine from his grandfather and kept it in the attic. I'd always hated how loud it was. The note read, "You were looking for closure in places we once loved. I found mine in the silence you left behind." I sat on the ground for what felt like hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared into the trees, numb. Because for the first time, I understood he hadn't just disappeared from my life. He'd carefully, methodically erased himself from my entire world. Ryan wasn't missing. He had chosen to become invisible. After I found the book and the typed note, something inside me shifted. I no longer felt like I was searching for Ryan. I felt like I was chasing the ghost of someone I'd already buried. But this ghost was clever, deliberate, and always one step ahead. He wasn't haunting me by accident. He was orchestrating this, piece by piece. I began to wonder if I was the one being followed. I stopped going to the grocery store and started getting deliveries. I unplugged the doorbell camera after it rang twice in one night, both times with no one on the porch. I stopped answering unknown numbers. My world was shrinking day by day, and I let it happen. I didn't tell anyone, not because I wanted to protect him, but because I didn't want anyone else to see how broken I was becoming. A few weeks later, a manila envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address, no stamp, just my name in block letters. Inside were copies of bank statements, mine and Ryan's, highlighted and annotated. It was like he'd pieced together our entire financial life in one master document. Each page had notes in the margins. This is where you stopped sharing. This is when you bought that dress and lied about the price. This is the hotel bill. He'd been watching everything unravel while pretending not to care. He'd recorded my distance with precision, with math, with receipts. I sat on the kitchen floor going page by page, realizing how much I'd underestimated his silence. He hadn't ignored the red flags. He was cataloging them. There was a final note at the bottom of the last page, typed like the one from the hiking trail. Now you know what it's like to live in the aftermath of someone else's choices. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but I didn't. Who would I even call? Hi. I cheated on my husband, and now he's sending me ghost notes from the void. No one would believe me. Or worse, they'd believe me and say I deserved it. Maybe I did. Later that night, I checked the attic. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to find that old typewriter. Maybe I needed to see it to believe this wasn't just in my head. When I pulled down the stairs and climbed up, everything was covered in dust, boxes, decorations, untouched memories. But in the far corner, beneath a tarp, the typewriter sat exactly where it had been. The same ink ribbon, the same broken spacebar. Except one thing had changed. A fresh page was in the roller, just one sentence typed. We're not done yet. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with every light on, eyes glued to the hallway, waiting for a creak, a shadow, a whisper, anything. But the house stayed quiet. Not peaceful, just empty. The kind of emptiness that feels like it's pressing in from the walls. I kept glancing at the attic ladder, afraid to go back up and check if the message was still there. Deep down, I knew it would be. Ryan had never been careless. Every step of this was designed. Intentional. Precise. The next morning, I received an email. No subject line. No name. Just a link to an audio file. I stared at it for a long time, afraid to click. Eventually, I played it. Static filled the first few seconds. Then I heard a familiar sound, my own voice. It was a voicemail I'd left Ryan the night he vanished. The one where I whispered, "I just want to know if you're okay." Except he hadn't just saved it. He'd recorded it. Twisted it. After my voice faded, his came through, calm and cold. "You should have asked that question a year ago. There was no threat. No closure. Just that line. And then silence. Something inside me cracked. I stopped pretending this would all blow over. I knew, without question, that Ryan had no intention of being found. He was punishing me the only way he knew how, by making sure I never moved on. Never healed. Never escaped. Every breadcrumb he left wasn't a path back to him. It was a loop. A maze with no exit. I was beginning to think that maybe he was still here, close enough to watch, to listen. Maybe he'd never left town at all. I drove to his sister's house. She opened the door with eyes swollen from months of worry, and when she saw me, she didn't even say hello. She said, "You know where he is, don't you?" I shook my head, and for the first time, I didn't try to lie. I told her everything, about the photos, the notes, the attic message, even the audio file. Her face changed. Not with anger, but with something worse, understanding. She looked at me like I'd finally confirmed what she'd feared all along. She walked away and returned with a flash drive. "He sent this to me 2 weeks after he left," she said. "Said I shouldn't open it unless you came here. Unless you looked me in the eye and told me the truth." She handed it to me and said nothing else. I drove home in silence. My hands trembled as I plugged the drive into my laptop. It contained a single video file, dated the day after he disappeared. I hit play. Ryan sat in our backyard, Jasper at his feet. He stared into the camera for a long time before he spoke. "You're probably watching this because you finally got honest. Good. That means you're ready." And then he said something that made my blood run cold. "I've been building something. And now, you're going to see it." I watched the video in total stillness. Ryan sat in the backyard, the one we used to drink coffee in on slow Sundays, the one I hadn't stepped foot in since he left. The sun was rising behind him, casting a soft light on his face. He looked tired, older, like he'd aged 10 years in 2 days, but there was a calmness in him I didn't recognize. A peace that hurt to see, because it wasn't shared with me. He leaned forward, folding his hands. "I needed to disappear, so I wouldn't destroy myself trying to forgive you," he said. "You think I left to punish you. I didn't. I left to find the parts of me you stopped seeing. And I did." The video cut to a series of clips, silent footage of a small cabin being built in the woods. A tiny home, hand-built, plank by plank. Ryan with paint on his face, hammer in hand, Jasper trotting beside him. He was creating something from scratch, something quiet and sturdy, away from all of it. I realized then what he meant by building something. It wasn't a trap. It wasn't revenge. It was freedom. The final clip was Ryan standing at the finished doorway, looking directly into the camera. "I don't hate you. I never did," he said. "But some damage you can't patch. You just have to start fresh. You gave me the reason to finally do that. And I hope someday, you'll build something of your own." The screen faded to black. I sat at the table crying, really crying, not out of guilt anymore, but out of clarity. For the first time since the affair, I saw what he saw. How much of himself he gave. How much I had taken for granted. But this wasn't a horror story. It wasn't even a tragedy. It was a rebirth. Not just for him, but maybe, in a strange way, for me too. The next day, I packed a single bag. Left the house. Donated most of what we owned. I didn't run, I walked. No destination. No plan. I just knew I couldn't stay frozen in the ruins of a life someone else had already left behind. Months later, I started volunteering at an animal shelter. I rescued a senior dog that reminded me of Jasper, quiet, patient, loyal. I planted a small garden. I called Ryan's sister once, just to say thank you. She didn't say where he was. I didn't ask. And sometimes, when I walk past a cabin store or see old planks of wood lined up in the back of a hardware shop, I smile. Not because I expect to see him, but because I know he's out there, living quietly, fully, in a life he rebuilt with his own hands. And I'm doing the same. What moment from this story hit you the hardest? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to never miss another story from Reddit Confessions.